Yes. Good. Good. YouTube is getting data. Twitch is getting data. So. Hello, I see the first viewers on Twitch and YouTube. Ah, can you hear us? Once burned with audio setting, always burned with audio settings. So, YouTube, can you hear us or hear me? Can you hear me? Also, Twitch, could somebody write something in chat if you can hear us? Good. Thanks, Stefan, for checking. Thanks. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, burned 2 years ago with OBS and audio stuff, and this will never go away. So happy to see you already. We will start in about 10 minutes. And yeah, so get something to eat, get something to drink, and run around your desktop or your desk. Yeah, we will start in 10 minutes. Oh, nearly ready to start. Good, good, good. So, people are here. So, from where are you all watching? Listen. Andy was curious. Who from where in the world we are watched? That not everybody is from Vienna. So, from where are you? Quick in the chat, and then we'll quickly start. So from Serbia, we have a few, Andy. Cool. Yeah, good. Yeah, let's get started with today's meetup, and also from Graz and Vienna. Let's get started with today's. May meetup. Last possible day for the May meetup. What still counts. As usual, this meetup is presented by .NET AT. We are a non-profit organization about sharing the knowledge and experience for .NET developers. Thank you all for joining all over Europe and more. You can find more about us on the various channels. We have a homepage, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube is clear. And we have also a Slack channel where we help each other out. I also want to thank our sponsors, Rubicon and Theatre Avery, for sponsoring us. Financially, this makes it possible that we run these meetups. We're using, example, StreamYard, what we're using for streaming. We have to pay, not that less. So these sponsoring make this possible. And when we go now then to in-person events again, this makes also possible that we continue streaming for them. Also, I want to thank JetBrains. They are sponsoring 112 months product license that we are raffling every meetup. To simply add the raffle, type some event during from now until end of the talk, JetBrains in the chat, and then we will raffle some lucky winner for it. Sometimes I always also show this nice banner in stream to remind you on that. One still, what we also raffle, we have some left. We are quite fans from Scott Hanselman, and he made some, I think a year now still ago, these cool Hey Friends t-shirts. We still have some left. If you fill out the feedback form at the end, you have the chance to win one. This is limited to Austria because of shipping costs. The JetBrains license, it's I send you the mail everywhere, but the t-shirt is limited for Austria, sadly. So fill out at the end the feedback form and you have the chance. Quick, not that much news from the community, but always our meetup is part of the .NET Foundation. And there is this .NET Foundation virtual user group. It's a user group for a lot of other meetups post their events. So if you want to have more content, .NET content, join this meetup group and you have enough, I would say. Good. Quickly, our plans for the future. We will have an in-person event starting with June next month. The next one is in 2 weeks. It will be a hybrid event. It's on location and we will still stream. And you need to be 2G to enter the location, so vaccinated or you were infected. So please bring your green pass QR code thingy. All Austrians should know what I'm talking about. Yeah, and with that, we have the honor today, our last remote meetup, to have Andy Knight here, the automation panda, and he will show us explain us the screenplay pattern. And I think it was a year ago, 1.5 years ago, Andy, when we did for SpecFlow a stream where we converted from page objects to screenplay. Andy converted me to a screenplay pattern believer. So this thing is absolutely incredible for UI automation. So it's simply cool. And if you want to see me freak out in the video and not seeing what is also possible, I post a stream recording from then in the chat. It was fun 2 hours converting page object to screenplay pattern, and it's never going back. Never going back.
Yes.
And if that, yeah, before I give Andy, questions will be answered at the end. But please ask them in the chat whenever you have it in mind. I will monitor the stuff and I will then forward the questions to Andy at the end. Yeah, and with that, that's my part. And Andy, your stage.
Great, thank you, Andy. Well, hello everyone. Guten Abend. Ich heiße Andreas und ich bin Automation Panda. Vielen Dank für die Einladung zu sprechen. Heute werde ich auf Screenplay sprechen. Now for English. Hello everyone. My name is Andy Knight. You can call me Pandy for short. I am the Automation Panda. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. Be sure to read my blog and follow me on Twitter at Automation Panda. For my day job, I am currently a developer advocate at Applitools. If you don't know, Applitools provides visual testing tools to help your apps look visually perfect. It's really cool stuff. If you want to give it a try, you can register on applitools.com for a free account, and you can try any of our SDKs. For example, if you wanted to do Selenium WebDriver in .NET. I'm also director of Test Automation University. Hoping most of y'all have heard about that, but if not, TAU has about 70 or so courses online about testing, automation, and everything in between, completely free. These are completely free courses. Anyone can take them. So if you want to learn about how do you automate tests, UI tests, or API tests using .NET, boom, we've got material in that. So be sure to check them out, Test Automation University. Also, for everyone who happens to live in Europe, I have some cool news. Even though I live in the United States, I will be traveling to Europe twice this autumn. I'll be speaking at Automation Star in Munich in October, and I'll be speaking at Agile Testing Days in Potsdam in November. So if you're there, be sure to look me up. Be like, hey, Andy. I'd love to meet you there. Now today, I will be telling you about the Screenplay Pattern. I am also the lead developer of Boa Constrictor, which is the .NET implementation of the Screenplay Pattern. And so I want to introduce you to the Screenplay Pattern as a new way to automate your interactions for your test automation. Now, Screenplay Pattern isn't exactly new. It's been around for quite a few years, but it is still new to a lot of folks in our industry. I strongly believe that Screenplay is a much better way to interact with web pages than the traditional page object model. In this talk, I'll back up that claim in 3 parts. First, I'll cover problems with the traditional ways of automating interactions. Second, I'll explain why the Screenplay Pattern is a better way. And third, I'll show how to use Screenplay Pattern with a C# library named Boa Constrictor. So to start, let's define that big I word I keep tossing around. Interactions. Simply put, interactions are how users operate software. For this talk, I'll focus primarily on web UI interactions, like clicking buttons and scraping text from a browser. Interactions are indispensable to testing. The simplest way to define testing is interaction plus verification. That's it. You do something, and you make sure it works. Think about any functional test case you've ever written or executed. The test case was a step-by-step procedure in which each step had interactions and verifications. Here's an example of a simple DuckDuckGo search test. DuckDuckGo is a search engine like Google or Yahoo. The steps here are very straightforward. Opening the search engine requires navigation. Searching for a phrase requires entering keystrokes and clicking the search button. Verifying results requires scraping the page title and result links from the new page. As you can see, interactions are everywhere. Unfortunately, our industry struggles to handle automated web UI interactions well. Even though most teams use Selenium WebDriver in their test automation code, every team seems to use it differently. There's lots of duplicate code and flakiness too. Let's look at the way many teams evolve their WebDriver-based interactions. I'll use C# for code examples. Of course, this is .NET Meetup, right? And I'll continue to use DuckDuckGo for testing. When teams first start writing automation code using Selenium WebDriver, they frequently write raw calls. Anyone familiar with the WebDriver API should recognize these calls. The WebDriver object is initialized using, let's say, a Chrome driver for the Chrome browser. The first step to open the search engine calls driver.navigate.goToURL with the DuckDuckGo website address. The second step performs the search by fetching web elements using driver.findElement with a locator. And then it calls methods like sendKeys and click. The third step uses assertions to verify the contents of the page title and the existence of the result links. Here I'm using fluent assertions. Should be greater than, should contain. Like I said, these are all very common WebDriver calls. If you've used WebDriver before, you know exactly what these are. And even if not, you could probably look at them and kind of follow along with what they're doing and how they're performing these interactions. Unfortunately, though, there's a big problem in this code. Race conditions. There are 3 race conditions in this code in which the automation does not wait for the page to be ready before making interactions. WebDriver does not automatically wait for elements to load or for titles to appear. Waiting is a huge challenge for web UI automation, and it's one of the reasons for what we call flaky tests. You could set an implicit wait that will make all calls wait until target elements appear. But unfortunately, they don't work for all cases, such as the title in race condition number 2. Explicit waits provide much more control over waiting, timeout, and conditions. They use a WebDriver wait object with a preset timeout value, and they must be placed explicitly throughout the code. Here, they're placed in the 3 spots where race conditions could happen. Each wait.until call takes in a function that returns true when the condition is satisfied. These waits are necessary, but they cause new problems. First, they cause duplicate code because web element locators are used multiple times. Notice how search form input homepage is called twice. Second, raw calls with explicit waits make code less intuitive. If I remove the comments from each paragraph of code, what's left is a wall of text. It is difficult to understand what this code does at a glance. To remedy these problems, most teams use the page object pattern. In the page object pattern, each page is modeled as a class with locator variables and interaction methods. So, a search page class could look like this. At the top, there could be a constant for the page URL and variables for the search input and search button locators. Notice how each has an intuitive name. Next, there could be a variable to hold the WebDriver reference. This reference would come via dependency injection through the constructor. The first method would be a load method that navigates the browser to the page's URL. And the second method would be a search method that waits for elements to appear, enters the phrase into the input field, and clicks the search button. This page object class has a decent structure and a mild separation of concerns. Locators and interactions have meaningful names. Page objects require a few more lines of code than raw calls at first, but their parts can easily be reused. The original steps can be rewritten using this new search page class. Notice how much cleaner this new code looks. The other steps can be rewritten using page objects as well. Unfortunately, page objects themselves suffer problems with duplications in their interaction methods. Suppose a page object needs a method to click an element. We already know the logic. Wait for the element to exist, and then click it. But what about clicking another element? This method here is essentially hard-coded for only one button. A second click method is needed to click the other button. Unfortunately, the code for both methods is basically the same. The code will be the same for any other click method as well. This is copy pasta, and it happens all the time in page objects. I've seen page objects grow to be thousands of lines long due to duplicative methods like these. At some point, some teams will say, "Ha, wait, more duplicate code? We can solve this problem with more object-oriented programming." And they'll create the infamous base page, a parent class for all other page object classes. The base page will have variables for the WebDriver and the wait object. And it will also provide common interaction methods, such as this click method that can click on any element. Abstraction for the win, am I right? Child pages will inherit everything from the base page. Child page interaction methods frequently just call base page methods. I've seen many teams stop here and say, this is good enough. Unfortunately, in my opinion, this really isn't very good at all. The base page helps mitigate code duplication, but it doesn't solve its root cause. Page objects inherently combine two separate concerns: page structure and interactions. Interactions are often generic enough to be used on any web element. Coupling interaction code with specific locators or pages forces testers to add new page object methods for every type of interaction needed for an element. Every element could potentially need to click to scrape the text to check if it's displayed, or do any other type of WebDriver interaction. That's a lot of extra code that shouldn't be necessary. The base page also becomes very top-heavy as testers add more and more code to share. Most frustratingly, the page object code I showed here is merely one type of implementation. What do your page objects look like? I bet dollars to donuts they look different than mine. Page objects are completely freeform. Every team implements them differently, sometimes wildly differently. There's no official version of the page object pattern. There's no conformity in its design. Even worse, within its design, there's almost no way for the pattern to enforce good practices. That's why people argue over things like whether page object locators should be public or private. Page objects would be better described as a convention than as a true design pattern. There must be a better way to handle interactions. Thankfully, there is. Let's take a closer look at how interactions happen. First, there is someone who initiates the interactions. Usually, this is a user. They are the ones making the clicks and taking the scrapes and doing everything. Let's call them the actor. Second, there is the product under test. For our examples in this talk, that's a web app. It has pages with elements. Web page structure is modeled using locators to access elements from the DOM. Keep in mind, the thing under test could also be anything else, like a mobile app, a microservice, or even a command line. Third, there are the interactions themselves. For web apps, they could be simple clicks and keystrokes, or they could be more complex interactions, like logging into the app or searching for a phrase. Each interaction will do the same type of operation on whatever target page or element it is given. Finally, there are objects that enable actors to perform certain kinds of interactions. For example, browser interactions need a tool like Selenium WebDriver to make clicks and scrapes. Let's call these things abilities. Actors, abilities, and interactions are each different types of concerns. We could summarize their relationship in one line. Actors use abilities to perform interactions. Actors use abilities to perform interactions. This is the heart of the screenplay pattern. In the page object convention, page objects become messy because concerns are all combined. The screenplay pattern separates concerns for maximal reusability and scalability. So let's learn how to screenplay using Boa Constrictor. Boa Constrictor is an open source C# implementation of the screenplay pattern that my former team and I developed while I worked at Precision Lender, now Q2. It was the cornerstone of Precision Lender's end-to-end test automation solution, and it still is today. Boa Constrictor can be used with any .NET test framework, like SpecFlow or NUnit. At Precision Lender, we used and absolutely loved SpecFlow. The Boa Constrictor project has a rich doc site hosted using GitHub pages. The GitHub repository is q2ebanking/boaconstrictor, and the NuGet package name is boa.constrictor with caps. So let's rewrite that DuckDuckGo search test from before using Boa Constrictor. As you watch this talk today, I recommend just reading along with the code as it appears on the screen to get concepts. Trying to code along in real time might be a big challenge. But after this talk, you can take the official Boa Constrictor tutorial to get hands-on with the code. To use Boa Constrictor, you'll need to install a couple dependencies: Boa Constrictor, REST Sharp, Selenium WebDriver, and if you'd like, the Fluent Assertions NuGet package as well. I'll also be using Chrome with Chrome Driver. So let's start. Everything begins with the actor, because the actor is the entity that initiates the interactions. Most test cases will need only one actor. The actor class optionally takes in 2 arguments. The first argument is a name, which can help describe who the actor is. The name will appear in logged messages. The second argument is a logger, which will send log messages from screenplay calls to a target destination. Loggers must implement Boa Constrictor's iLogger interface. Console Logger is a class that will log messages to the system console. You can define your own custom loggers by implementing iLogger. Abilities enable actors to initiate interactions. For example, an actor needs a Selenium WebDriver instance to click elements on a web page. Read this new line in plain English. The actor can browse the web with a new Chrome driver. Boa Constrictor's Fluent-like syntax makes its call chains very readable. Actor.can adds an ability to an actor. Browse the web is the ability that enables actors to perform web UI interactions. Browse the web.with provides the WebDriver object that the actor will use, which in this case is a new Chrome driver object. Boa Constrictor supports all browser types. All abilities must implement the iAbility interface. Actors can be given any number of abilities. Browse the web here simply holds a reference to the WebDriver object. Web UI interactions will retrieve this WebDriver object from the actor through dependency injection. Before the actor can call any WebDriver-based interactions, the web pages under test need models. These models should be static classes that include locators for elements on the page, and possibly page URLs. Page classes should only model structure. They should not include any interaction logic. The screenplay pattern separates the concerns of page structure from interactions. That way, interactions can target any element, maximizing code reusability. Interactions like clicks and scrapes work the same, regardless of the target elements. The search page class here has 2 members. First member is a URL string named URL. The second is a locator for the search input element named search input. Each locator has two parts: a plain language description used for logging, and a query that's used to find the element on the page, sometimes also called a selector. Boa Constrictor uses Selenium WebDriver's by queries. For convenience, locators can be constructed using a statically imported L method. Now that we have a page, we can do some interactions. Screenplay Pattern has two kinds of interactions. The first type is called a task. A task performs actions without returning a value. Examples of tasks include clicking an element, refreshing the browser, and loading a page. These interactions all do something rather than get something. Boa Constrictor provides a task named navigate for loading a web page using a target URL. Read this line in plain English. The actor attempts to navigate to the URL for the search page. Again, Boa Constrictor's fluent-like syntax is very readable. Clearly, this line will load the DuckDuckGo search page. Actor.attempts_to calls the task. All tasks must implement the iTask interface. When the actor calls attempts_to on a task, it calls the task's perform as method. Navigate is just the name of a task. And here, .toURL provides the target URL in a static builder. The navigate task's perform as method fetches the WebDriver object from the actor's ability and uses it to load the given URL. SearchPage.URL came from that search page class we previously wrote. Putting the URL in the page class just makes it universally available. Now, that was a task. The second type of interaction is called a question. A question returns an answer after performing actions. Examples of questions include getting an element's text, location, or appearance. Each of these interactions returns some sort of value. Boa Constrictor provides a question named value attribute that gets the value of the text currently inside an input field. So read this line in plain English. The actor asking for the value attribute of the search page's search input element should be empty. Actor.AskingFor calls a question. All questions must implement the iQuestion interface. When the actor when the actor calls asking for, or the equivalent asks for method, it calls the question's request as method. Value attribute is the name of the question, and .of is the static builder that provides the target web element's locator. The value attribute's request as method fetches the WebDriver object, waits for the target element to exist on the page, and scrapes and returns the value attribute. SearchPage.searchInput, as you guessed it, comes from the page object we created before. Or rather, I should say the page class, not a page object. Finally, once the value is obtained, the test must make an assertion on it. Should be empty is a fluent assertion that verifies that the search input field is empty when the page is first loaded. The test case's next step is to enter a search phrase. Doing this requires two interactions: typing the phrase into the search input and clicking the search button. However, since searching is such a common operation, we can create a custom interaction for search by composing the lower level interactions together. The search DuckDuckGo task takes in a search phrase, and in its perform as method, it calls two other interactions: send keys and click. Using one task to combine these lower level interactions makes the code more readable and understandable. It also improves automation and reusability. So read this line in plain English now. The actor attempts to search DuckDuckGo for Panda. That's concise and intuitive. The last test case step should verify that the result links appear after entering a search phrase. Unfortunately, this step has a race condition. The result page takes a few seconds to display the result links. Automation must wait for those links to appear. Checking too early will make the test case fail as a race condition. Boa Constrictor makes waiting easy. Read this line in plain English. The actor waits until the appearance of the result page result links is equal to true. In simpler terms, wait until the result links appear. Waits until is a special method. It will repeatedly call a question until the answer meets a given condition. For this step, the question is the appearance of result links on the result page. Before links are loaded, this question will return false. Once the links appear, it will return true. The condition for waiting is for the answer value to become true. Boa Constrictor provides several conditions out of the box, such as equality, mathematical comparison, and string matching. You can also implement custom conditions by implementing the iCondition interface. Waiting is smart. It will repeatedly ask the question until the answer is met, and then it will move on. This makes waiting much more efficient than hard sleeps. If the answer does not meet the condition within the timeout, then it will raise an exception. Timeout defaults to 30 seconds, but it can be overridden. Many of Boa Constrictor's WebDriver-based interactions already handle waiting. Anything that uses a target element, such as click, send keys, or text, will automatically wait for the element to exist before attempting the operation. We even saw this in some of the previous example code. However, there are times where explicit waits are needed. Interactions that query appearance or existence do not automatically wait. The final step is to quit the browser. Boa Constrictor's quit WebDriver task does this. If you don't quit the browser, then it will remain open and possibly turn into a zombie process. Always, always quit your browser. Furthermore, in whatever test framework you use, put the step to quit the browser in a cleanup or teardown routine so that it is called even when the test fails. And there we have our completed test using Boa Constrictor's Screenplay Pattern. All the separated concerns come together beautifully to handle interactions in a much better way. The Screenplay Pattern can be used for more than Web UI interactions. Boa Constrictor has interactions for REST APIs using REST Sharp too. Let's quickly step through a REST API test. The actor is the same as before. To call REST APIs, the actor needs an ability named call REST API. It uses a REST Sharp REST client with a base URL. For this test, we'll use a public API called dog API, which returns random pictures of dogs. One actor can have multiple abilities as long as each ability has a different type. So if you were doing Web UI interactions together with REST API actions, you would add 2 abilities to your actor. Boa Constrictors uses REST Sharp's REST request objects directly, which specify resource path and HTTP method. To call the REST API, Boa Constrictor uses this call. The actor calls the REST request using the given request object. We can then check the response object for response code and other data. This test is quite basic, but Boa Constrictor can do some advanced tricks like downloading files, automatically dumping responses, and automatically deserializing response bodies. REST API interactions may also be composed with Web UI interactions. As we said before, the Screenplay Pattern can be summed up in one line. Actors use abilities to perform interactions. It's that simple. Actors use abilities to perform interactions. For those who like object-oriented programming, the Screenplay Pattern is, in a sense, a solid refactoring of the page object convention. Solid refers to 5 design principles for maintainability and extensibility. I won't go into detail about each principle here because the information can be a bit dense. But if you're interested, then snap a quick screenshot right now and check out each of these principles later. Wikipedia is a good source. You'll find that the screenplay pattern follows each one nicely. So, why should you use screenplay pattern over page object convention or raw calls? There are a few key reasons. First, screenplay pattern, and specifically the Boa Constrictor project, provide rich, reusable, reliable interactions out of the box. Boa Constrictor already has tasks and questions for every type of WebDriver-based interaction. Each one is battle-hardened and safe. Second, screenplay interactions are composable. Like we saw with searching for a phrase, you can easily combine interactions. This makes code easier to use and reuse, and it avoids lots of duplication. Third, the screenplay pattern makes waiting easy using existing questions and conditions. Waiting is one of the toughest parts of black box automation. It's where a lot of your race conditions can make things flaky. Easy, proper waiting is amazing. Fourth, screenplay calls are readable and understandable. They use a fluent-like syntax that reads more like prose than code. And finally, the screenplay pattern at its core is a design pattern for any type of interaction. In this talk, I showed how to use it for web UI interactions, and I teased how to use it for REST API. But you can use it for other things like mobile, like command line, or really anything you need to test. And you can make your own interactions too. Overall, the screenplay pattern provides better interactions for better automation. That's the point. It's not just another Selenium WebDriver wrapper. It's not just a new spin on page objects. Screenplay is a great way to exercise any feature behaviors under test. And as we saw before, it's not that complicated. Actors use abilities to perform interactions. That's it. The programming behind it just has some nifty dependency injection. If you'd like to start using the screenplay pattern for your test automation, there's a few ways to get started. If you're programming in C#, you can use Boa Constrictor, the library I showed in the examples. If you're programming in Java or JavaScript, you can use Serenity BDD, a mature, complete test automation framework that includes the screenplay pattern. Serenity BDD greatly influenced Boa Constrictor, but please note the two are entirely separate projects. Boa Constrictor is not Serenity BDD for .NET. Instead, Boa Constrictor aims to be a simpler, standalone implementation of the screenplay pattern. If you're programming in Python, then guess what? You're in luck. Python is personally my favorite programming language, and I think it's one of the best languages for test automation. I'm currently developing a screenplay implementation in Python in my spare time. It'll be like Boa Constrictor, but the code will be even simpler because it's Python. I recently released it to PyPy as a package using the name Screenplay. So if you're using Python, all you need to do is pip install Screenplay, and you've got the core pattern at your fingertips. If none of these options suit you, then you could create your own. Screenplay pattern does require a bit of boilerplate code, but it's worthwhile in the end. You can always reference code from Boa Constrictor and from Serenity BDD because they're open source projects. If you want to learn more about Boa Constrictor, please visit our doc site. It provides thorough information about the project and the screenplay pattern. I recommend taking the hands-on tutorial so you can develop a test automation project yourself with Boa Constrictor. It covers both web UI and REST API interactions. Also, since Boa Constrictor is open source, I'd love for you to contribute and join our Discord channel. So, thank you so much for taking the time to learn more about the screenplay pattern and Boa Constrictor with me today. Again, my name is Andy Knight. I'm the Automation Panda, developer advocate at Applitools, and director of Test Automation University. Be sure to read my blog and follow me on Twitter, and reach out to me if you'd like to contribute to the Boa Constrictor project. Thank you so much, and now it is time for Q&A.
Exactly, and we just got a question. Logical Distraction asks, does calling an ability also start prerequisites, like an escalation ability could start an escalation service only if needed right?
In theory, you could do it that way. When you construct the ability, have it trigger whatever it needs. The way that I did it with the browse the web ability, that requires your WebDriver object to already be initialized, and you just kind of pass it in. I like abilities to be lightweight. I like to think of abilities kind of like a holder or like a toolbox. You put your tools in your toolbox and you give that to the handyman who's the actor. But I mean, you could have it start things or do things.
Good, thank you. So, quickly check the chat if there are other questions. The chat has now again the chance to ask questions.
I see someone says actor use abilities to perform interactions changed my life. Changed mine too, friend.
Oh yes, I can only agree. It's yeah. When I think a bit how much code we could throw away by this migration from page object to screenplay pattern and remove the whole abstraction layer.
Oh yeah, I mean, for everyone on the call, about a year and a half ago or so, Sabotage Andy and I did a live stream where we took a project and converted it from page object to Boa Constrictor, and it was amazing. If you go to the Boa Constrictor doc pages, there's a link for videos. You can find a link to that recording, so you can see exactly how we did it. It was amazing. It was amazing.
I posted the link again in chat. So, but there's a new question. Are there any known limitations?
Known limitations. Well, I mean, the limitations would not be so much in the screenplay pattern as it would be in the interactions that you develop in screenplay pattern. Remember, screenplay is a pattern for modeling any sort of interaction with features under test. It's most useful for test automation, but it could be used for like web scraping or I mean, basically anything you need to do to interact with a separate live system, right? So there's not really, I wouldn't say there's really limitations in the screenplay pattern itself. Some things that some people may be a little unhappy about would be some of the syntax, right? Some people might think it's a little long to say like actor attempts to do something or actor asks for something. And when you make your interactions to keep that nice prose like fluent like syntax, you have to add extra static builder methods and all. So that might feel a little bit cumbersome for folks. Like, hey, I have to add a whole lot of code. But honestly, it's well worth it in the end, because when you have a large project with, hundreds to thousands of tests and you don't even remember who wrote which test anymore, to go back and be able to read the screenplay calls and be like, oh, this is what's happening, is so much better. So much better. I can also share that at my previous company, Precision Lender, which got acquired by Q2, that's where I developed Boa Constrictor originally. It was because I had done at the previous company a huge project using page objects and just hated it. Like, it was bad. I'm like, I'm never doing this again. So when I got to Precision Lender, I was hired as the first software engineer in test. I was chartered to make the testing and automation happen. And since it was a Microsoft shop, we did .NET, we did SpecFlow. And so I was like, I'm doing better than page objects. And I read up on Screenplay and I realized there was no good implementation in .NET. And so by Jingo, I implemented it. And then after a little while, battle hardened and everything, we released it as an open source project. We actually released it as part of Hacktoberfest 2020, the big annual open source hackathon that DigitalOcean runs. We released Boa Constrictor during that time. And we right now to this day at Precision Lender, they run anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 end-to-end test iterations a day. It's just running continuously off of different, like every time somebody makes a code change, triggers it off. Then they run overnight the full suite against different bank configurations and stuff. And so Boa Constrictor is the cornerstone of that whole solution. It has like 99.0% uptime, like flaky tests basically don't exist. It's very reliable, it's very fast because of smart waiting. And the you would think that, oh gosh, if you have, I think they have like 2,000 unique tests or something. You think, oh, that's a huge project. They probably have like tens of thousands of lines of code. It's like, well, because of the reusability, there is very minimal code duplication, and so that team and I were able to scale very high to handle a lot of tests and to be safe and secure about it. So this thing is battle hardened. Like if you're wondering, like, is it going to be imperformant? Is it going to slow things down? No, no. This thing is Speedy Gonzalez, man. It's fast.
And I just saw you already support WebDriver 4, Selenium 4.
Yes. That was something that we added as soon as Selenium 4 came out. We were there testing betas. Like we were using beta of Selenium 4 internally, and then as soon as they dropped the real one, we just dropped it in, spun it out. It was great.
Yeah, I still need to do that on some projects.
I mean, like, anyway, I won't go into that. I have opinions about it, but Selenium 4 is great. Yeah, there weren't any new features that I was like personally super excited about. Nothing that would have dramatically changed my workflow or the things that I do. But yeah, it's good though.
Good. Stefan has written in the chat, number of people converted to Screenplay Pattern Believer ++.
Sweet. I love it. Yes. Yeah. So when we were developing the doc site for Boa Constrictor, we were thinking like, oh, we should connect like a custom domain name to it. So we're like, what can we do? boaConstrictor.screenplay.com. Somebody in our team suggested IHatePageObjects.com. IHatePageObjects.com. We didn't do it, but I was really tempted. I mean, I will say, like, when you're deciding what you should be doing for a test automation project, right? If you're just writing a one-time script to go scrape the web, like you can use raw calls. It's not terrible, right? If you have a very small project, you could get away with page objects. But by the time you hit about 100 tests, and I've seen this for myself, I've seen this for other people. By the time you hit about 100 web tests, page object is donezo. Like it's not going to scale with you. And you really need something like Screenplay. And my stance is, now that we have a good Screenplay implementation in C# in .NET, if you're doing a .NET test automation project, there is no reason you should ever use page objects. You should just use Boa Constrictor and Screenplay from the start. Like, there's no reason to hurt yourself. Some other languages, they still don't necessarily have Screenplay. Like in Java and JavaScript, you do, but you have to adopt the whole Serenity BDD framework, which may not be something you want to do. Python, I just released the core of it about a month ago. It doesn't have WebDriver interactions yet, but it does have the core of the pattern, the actor, the abilities, the interactions.
Good. I think that was it from the questions.
Cool.
So I take over. Thank you, Andy, for having us.
Well, thank you so much for inviting.
Preaching about the Screenplay pattern. And small surprise, every speaker on our meetup get a custom coaster with our logo.
Oh man, that's so awesome. Thank you.
I will send one to you that you get it before October.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Good. Before there is not just a question there, and I think this could be interesting before I continue. Logical distraction asks, random question, is there any good way to just test with all latest browsers without running into Chrome driver not compatible with Chrome version X?
Oh my gosh. Oh gosh, this problem sucks so bad. Sucks so bad.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So clearly, Mr. or Ms. whoever, logical distraction out there, I feel your pain. I feel it real bad. I think everyone who uses Selenium WebDriver feels it real bad. Honestly, I don't have a good solution for Selenium WebDriver. I've seen there are certain projects out there that are like WebDriver Manager. Like I think that's what it's called in Java. There's somebody who has a project out there like that, where it's like they try to kind of manage that for you. The dumb answer, the simplest answer is on whatever machine you use for testing, just turn off Chrome Auto Update. That's the easiest way to keep it locked in. Or you could use a different tool like Cypress or Playwright that will not have this issue, right? Cypress and Playwright, they don't have this little WebDriver executable. They just
But
use
Cypress doesn't work on .NET.
Well, yeah, that sucks.
I'm getting asked this every 3 months.
Yeah, so Cypress is great and awesome if you're a JavaScript oriented front end developer and that's your entire world and you live in a bubble, right? If you want to do like more how can I say? If you want to do more like serious automation outside of that little bubble, Playwright. I mean, WebDriver is good. I think Playwright is even better because whereas WebDriver is a very low level kind of protocol, Playwright is much more mature, much more high level. It does some of the nicer things for you. Whereas for perfect examples like clicking buttons, and when you have WebDriver, when you click the button, all it does is it fires the event. It doesn't do any waiting. It doesn't do any logging. So if that button isn't ready, kaboom, you get an exception. With Playwright, there's automatic waiting built in, kind of like what Boa Constrictor does for you, right? Boa Constrictor is smart and waits and then proceeds with click. That's what Playwright does for you. Playwright, it doesn't use the full browsers. It uses browser projects. So you're not testing Google Chrome. You're testing the Chromium project. You're not testing Safari. You're testing WebKit. So there is that nuance of difference. But all that to say, the management of your browser projects is much easier in Playwright because they do it automatically for you. And it's also blazingly fast.
Yes.
Playwright is shockingly fast for web UI testing. It's amazing. So it's like Cypress is super slow. Selenium is okay. When you tune Selenium with a project like Boa Constrictor with Screenplay Pattern, we have those smart weights and stuff. It can actually be pretty performant. Playwright just runs away with it. Like Playwright is boom, boom, boom. It's super fast. So pros, cons, trade-offs.
Yeah, and I don't want to plug my own stuff always, but I also did a year ago a migration from Selenium to Playwright with a SpecFlow project.
Ooh.
And posted the link. It's simply conversion 1-to-1 was 30% faster.
Wow. Sweet.
And that's on page object.
Ooh. So that's actually an interesting thing. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that wasn't.
I was going to say one thing that I want to do with the Boa Constrictor project is I want to bring Playwright in. To do that, I need to do some rework. I'll need to split the NuGet package into separate projects. So you have like your core project, your WebDriver project, your REST project, and then we'll add a Playwright project. And then with Playwright, I mean, the only thing we really need is like Andy and I were talking about this earlier. Because Playwright already handles a lot of that automatic waiting and stuff, it wouldn't make sense to like wrap every single Playwright method, but rather just to have like the ability there, to have like the logging put in place. And then you would simply make your own tasks and questions that would then directly call the Playwright calls. So, and yeah, I would love to get that in place when I get a chance. If anybody out there wants to contribute in that way, let me know. Because I would love to bring Playwright to Boa Constrictor.
Yeah, so also for me, if you have the chance if you start something new, have a look into Playwright. And if you ever read Selenium, you could also throw money at the problem and use some Selenium grid host like Browser Stack, Source Labs,
Mm-hmm.
and then they are responsible for solving this problem for you.
Mm-hmm.
Good. In the meantime, we got another question from Logical Distraction. How about Test Cafe? Any good?
Test Cafe.
I never heard about Test Cafe.
So I've heard of it. I've never used it. And it's just another web testing thing. Is it using? Shoot, let me look at this. It doesn't use WebDriver. I think it either uses like raw JavaScript in the browser or it uses debug protocols. Looks like it's JavaScript only. It runs on Node.js and uses the browsers you already have. Okay. My gut tells me this one's using JavaScript in the browser, just like Cypress. So I haven't really used Test Cafe. I've heard of it. I don't know much about it. I can't really speak to it. I would guess the playwright is faster. I don't know, though. It all depends on the underlying technology. It looks fairly similar. I mean, the syntax looks very similar to Cypress. So, pick your poison. It's not .NET, though, so oops. C# is the Cadillac of programming languages. Come on, man.
And the development environment.
Oh my gosh. I love C#. Like I grew up doing Java, right, starting in 10th grade forward. And I mean, back then, Java was the darling of the computer science world, right? They were starting to teach all the courses in Java. Everything was in Java. All the big jobs, like job postings, wanted Java experience. And then, about, I want to say like 6-ish years ago, 5, 6 years, or 6 or 7 years ago, I should say, I picked up C#, and I was like, wow, this is really nice. All those little frustrating things I didn't like are fixed. Wow. True story.
Yeah.
I mean, Java's good. I'm not trying to crap on Java. I love Java. I still use Java. Java's great. But from like the syntax of the language, it seems like C# was faster to get to the good state of things. Like one of the things I love are those like little arrows for defining functions. Like, oh, it's so nice. It's so nice. Stuff like that.
At the end, is use the right tool for the job.
True. Yeah.
Good. Then that was the question. Again, thank you, Andy, for being here. Thanks to all our viewers for joining today, spending the evening or morning or lunch with us. Thanks again to our sponsors, Rubicon, Theater Avery, and JetBrains. And that's the point where we make quickly the giveaway tool. So you have some seconds to type in JetBrains into the chat to be able to win one license until I change sharing. So giveaway tool. So 2 entries are there. So let's see who will be the lucky winner. Logical distractions. Congratulations. Please send an email to team@.netdevs.at. Post it in the chat, and I will send you the license code in the next few days. And that, back again to my slides when I can find them again. Where's the window? There's the window. There's the window. Yes. Good. If you want to host a meetup, please reach out to us. We now have in-person events, so we need hosts. Next meetup will be in 2 weeks, June 14th. We will have our MS Build 2022 after party. We'll have a discussion rounds with members of the community, and talking about the various topics from MS Build this year, and will be at Theater Avery, and will be streamed. For July and August, we're still working on the details, but as usual, there will be a meetup, as our goal is to have every month a meetup. And yeah, please also spread the word that we're hosting these meetups. Invite colleagues, friends, customers, retweet our stuff. Simply invite everybody that has something to do with .NET. It's our goal to create a place and make the possibility to spread knowledge and our experience with .NET to make our all lives easier. Again, you can find us on various platforms. I post these links again here. And as always, want to make our meetups better. And for that, we would need your feedback, and posted the link to the feedback form in the chat. So please fill out the feedback, and if you there, you also have the chance to enter the raffle for the Hey Friends t-shirt. Again, sadly only for Austria. Good. And with that, we are done for today. Have a nice evening, rest of the day, morning, and we'll see you next time. Bye.